Good morning. You're watching Business World Live. I'm Jess De Los Santos. Here are the biggest stories to kickstart this trading day, Thursday. Global oil prices continue to soar as tensions between Ukraine and oil producer Russia show no signs of easing. Over here in the Philippines, the Energy Department is now studying a possible suspension on oil excise taxes, while transport groups are calling for a fair hike. With the ongoing disruptions in the fuel market, one sector may benefit from the standoff between Russia and Ukraine. The Trade Department says the crisis could spur investments in renewable energy. And equity space is not spared. The Russia-Ukraine crisis shakes markets around the world, including our own local bourse. Miners, though, are seen to be the winner as the commodity prices soar.
Begin our broadcast with global crude prices surging. That's on the back of the ongoing tensions between Russia and the Ukraine, with Russia being one of the biggest oil producers in the world.
And as price shocks continue to disrupt the world market, the Energy Department says it's now looking into the suspension of excise taxes on oil. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez has the rest of the story.
For the 8th straight week, local oil prices have shot up due to higher prices globally. The Energy Department said one of the reasons is the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Russia is one of the biggest oil producers in the world, and although we don't source directly from them, the tight supply is making it harder and more expensive for us.
Yung mga kinukuhanan natin ng finished petroleum products, yung crude nila nanggagaling sa Russia. So indirectly affected din tayo.
The Philippines is a net importer of oil, meaning we don't produce our own fuel, which means we're greatly affected by price shocks. According to the DOE, as of September 2021, the country's oil demand was at 66.9 billion liters. Calls are growing once more to suspend excise taxes, which the government relies on to fund social and health programs.
Or habang ang presyo nasa above $80 kung yun ang gusto nila, bawasan natin ang kalahati ang excise taxes on fuel. No? Maybe the next Congress we should also study.
Under the train law, excise tax on diesel is at 6 pesos per liter, while gasoline is at 10 pesos per liter. The DOE says it's already studying whether to suspend it, but it might impact our COVID response programs.
Meron po tayong tinatawag na targeted relief. Di ba po ba? Parang hindi lahat may subsidiya. Targeted relief sa mga vulnerable sectors, like for instance sa transport group.
For this year, the Bangko Sentral had forecast crude prices to hover around $83 a barrel. It's now nearing $100 a barrel. The Bangko Sentral has warned that inflation will shoot up if global oil prices reach the $80+ level. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
All right, Dan, the equity sell-off continues amid the growing political tensions in the Russia-Ukraine situation, and we aren't spared, are we?
Definitely not, Jess. Let's take a quick peek at Asia. First of all, you can see Australia, Japan, Hong Kong opening in the red. This, of course, amid what you've reported. U.S. adding sanctions. They've targeted the builder of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline that runs from Russia all the way to Germany, one of the biggest energy crises over in Europe already. And the EU has applied penalties to 23 high-ranking Russians. Meanwhile, from the Kremlin side, they did mention that separatist leaders over in eastern Ukraine have written to President Vladimir Putin of Russia seeking for help. And all of that, of course, has led oil prices to soar. It is still on the uptrend, up by 88 cents per barrel, closing in on $100 per barrel for the Brent prices, already at record highs yesterday. So obviously this is a new record high, and that has seen the highest level since 2014. But it's not just oil, just commodities as well. In fact, everything from nickel to copper have been rising and touching some record highs here. You can see that on my Bloomberg Commodity Index here. And of course, on the back of that, you can see us continuing that slide. We're down by 0.2%. And this was already what we've seen yesterday. Phil stopped saying investors mostly very worried over the tensions and that impact on the oil prices and how that would impact, of course, our local industries here. But there is one bright spot, if you could say it, that is our nickel miners. Take a look at that. I'm going to pick up the 1-day chart for you. Actually, I'm going to pick up the 5-day chart because you can see the 7 days of rally here. The metal, at least nickel, has hit its decade high. Mark Ventures has led those gains yesterday. And take a look at 5 days in a row. Mark Ventures up by 13% already. Nickel has reached $25,000 a ton. That's the first time since 2011. Of course, the whole issue is that might disrupt the sanctions on Russia might disrupt the exports of Russia when it comes to nickel. They do seem to be exporting at least 70% of the world's nickel, and that might be benefiting the Philippines. We've seen the longest streak for this sector since at least October. And finally, just still in the thick of earnings season, just one bank to watch out for here, Metro Bank, of course, top 3 player, up by 1.3% to 60 pesos and 65 centavos per share. That's as they've reported that their fourth quarter 2021 net income more than doubled. And that has brought their 2021 full year net income to up by 60%. On the back, of course, of higher net non-interest income that was up by 27% to 21.1 billion pesos. Another thing, they did mention that the non-performing loans have also eased. That's around 2.2% compared to 2.4% in 2020, plus improved NPL coverage ratio. And one last thing to note, Jess, before we end the market report, PSE will be returning to its full day 5-hour trading schedule again. They tried to do that and then it lasted about a week. That's going to be March 1st. Markets will be open at 9:30 a.m. and will be closing at 3 p.m.
All right, let's see if we can extend that for longer this time, Dan. Meanwhile, Transport Group Manibela has filed a petition for the implementation of fare hikes for PUVs. That's amid the rising prices of oil. Chairman and spokesperson Mar Valbuena tells the big story that they are proposing a 2 peso increase in jeepney fare and 5 pesos for UV Express. The group is also reiterating its call for the government to suspend excise taxes on fuel to soften the blow of oil price hikes to PUV drivers. Valbuena assures commuters that their request for fare hike is only temporary and that the sector can revert to original rates once fuel prices have eased.
Kasama na natin sa pang-araw-araw ang ating mga mananakay. Kaya naman sinasabi natin na hindi siya fix kasi napakahirap din. Alam natin na nagre-recover din yung ating mga mananakay, yung ating mga manggagawa. Kaya tayo habang mataas lamang po ang presyo ng diesel, pwede naman pong ibaba yan kapag bumalik na doon sa mas mababang presyo.
As the tension in Ukraine intensifies, so do oil prices, which have so far gone to the roof here in the Philippines at the 80 peso per liter level. To give us an idea as to how massive the impact of that ongoing rift in the West is, we have on the show Professor Emmanuel Leico, economist and president of the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Good morning, Prof. Leico. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Jess. Good morning to our televiewers, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes,
once
sir.
Again.
What's the worst that could happen here should the tension in the West not ease down anytime soon? I mean, the BSP has set the tipping point at $110 per barrel. Are we closer to that now? Is that a possibility?
Well, they're even talking about $120 per barrel, and right now we are already up in the hundreds, approaching the $100 level. And the conflict has not even come full-blown. So I think we can expect that things will get worse before it gets better. So what can we do? I'm not sure that we can do better than the European countries with more advanced economies, or even in the US, which right now is already experiencing high levels of prices. And what we can expect here is that once this conflict goes full-blown, the Philippines will really feel the impact of this.
Okay, it goes without saying, Prof. Leco, this is going to derail the country's recovery, but how bad is it going to be for the Philippines, especially when it comes to attracting investments? I mean, do we stand to lose investments here as investors flee to safe havens?
Well, attracting investments right now is always has always been a problem for the Philippines. Now, with this new monkey wrench being thrown at us, that will even be more difficult. So I think rather than look at foreign investors coming in right now, let us look at how we can manage and how we can provide a better cushion for the consumers during this conflict.
Sir, just jumping off of that point, the BSP gave a renewed call on the inflation for this year. How is this going to affect that inflation outlook? Do we have enough policy tools, for example, cutting the excise taxes to ensure that this situation in the Ukraine and Russia doesn't spill over into not just oil prices but second round effects?
Yes. Actually, the interest rates in the Philippines had been considered low for a period of time during this pandemic. And the incentive to save right now because of low interest is just not there. So people want to spend, but because of the expected increase in prices or an uptick in our inflation, the Banco Central may not be able to touch the interest rates without creating more impact on the inflationary environment. So this is tying our hands. This is what we would call external shocks to the Philippine economy, and it may come not only in terms of the pandemic, but it can also come in form of economic warfare between very strong economies. And right now, we may not see the shooting wars yet, but they're already shooting at each other in the world market. The financial sanctions that the U.S. have already imposed on Russia will create more impact on the world market. You see, the sentiment now is that people are not letting go. People are not letting go of their money. People are not letting go of their investments because they want to wait and see how this economic warfare between the biggest economies in the world will play out. So for the Philippines, rather than just wait and see, I think what is clear now is that inflation will hit us. Now, how are we going to manage inflation without hurting the consumers that much? It's going to hurt everybody, but I think we have to manage how it will impact on our markets. Remember, the structure of our economy is mostly consumer-driven. This is the strongest factor that drives our economy. Once we choke the consumers with high prices, that will create a much, much more serious impact on our economy.
Sir, to that end, are you in favor of the government stepping in to regulate the prices of oil even further? And how can they even do this if so?
Well, they should have done that from the beginning. You cannot just come in today because of an emergency. The government cannot control prices, especially at this point. There are so many structural interventions that they need to do. There are laws that have deregulated oil prices. And how can the government come in and control prices? They cannot just impose a ceiling on the oil prices without hurting the whole economy. If they impose a price ceiling, there will be a major disruption. So the government needs to have a more comprehensive intervention in our economy. Price management is one. I heard about the targeted subsidy or the targeted protection. I think that will be a very, very difficult undertaking. We have seen that during the train law. It will be very difficult to transfer unconditional transfers or cash to the citizens already. I think we have already experienced that. So right now, it's very difficult to only start thinking about how we will manage the disruption. But it's not too late. It's difficult, but it is not too late. And I think at this point, the government needs to mobilize all sectors. We need to have everybody on deck. We need the private sector. We need the consumers. We need the suppliers, the producers, and definitely the government needs to lead this initiative. How can they lead this? I think by way of their policy interventions, get the legislators back. I don't know if they can do that at this point when everybody is campaigning, but the problems, the crisis that is in front of us right now is about to hit us really big, probably bigger than the COVID-19. COVID-19 has a prolonged impact, but it did not hit us right away. It shut down our economy, but it took quite some time before the effects were felt by the people. But this time, once the prices go up, the prices go up overnight. And now we're looking at $100 level per barrel. Right now, it's not a remote idea that it will hit soon enough, 110, 120, even 130. And that will create a serious impact on the price levels in the Philippines.
All right, Prof. Leco, this series of price hikes that we've been experiencing is not entirely new. We've been through this last year. A lot of plans have been put on the table here. For one, there are proposals to suspend excise taxes on oil. At the same time, of course, you have members from the transport group asking for fare hikes here. Just how sound are these proposals at this stage?
Well, if taken individually, they're just going to create more pain rather than alleviate the problems that we are having right now. You increase the fares, that will hurt the riders. The riders, if they do not get any more subsidy, if they do not get any more support in terms of their purchasing power, that will create the consumer. So it's just a matter of you increase fares, you're hurting the riders. You suspend the value-added tax, suspend the excise tax. That's going to hurt the government, and the government probably will also hold back on the social services. So it's not going to be a slam dunk solution that we should be looking at. I think it has to be a comprehensive intervention that will take into account the impact of this Ukraine conflict on the Philippine economy and our people.
Okay, it's going to be a very delicate balancing act as to what government is going to do next. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Again, Professor Emmanuel Leco, President of the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you, Danny.
Now, coming right up after the break. The Philippine government continues to evacuate Filipinos from conflict-hit Ukraine.
For that and other stories when Businessworld Live returns, stay with us.
You're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. The Philippine government says repatriation efforts for Filipinos in the Ukraine are still ongoing.
But for now, OFWs in the Eastern European countries say the situation on the ground is nothing out of the ordinary. Marian Enriquez with the report.
This is the street right now. Everything is peaceful.
Just like any ordinary day, this is how some OFWs in Kiev, Ukraine's capital, describe the situation amid the growing tension with Russia. 36-year-old Ruby Jean is among the 380 Filipinos currently there. She lives with her husband Volodymyr and their 9-month-old son. She says the Philippine government has a contingency plan for them should the situation escalate.
Okay naman po kami kasi ang Philippine government todo suporta po talaga sila sa amin. Chine-check kami lagi.
Some parents have evacuated their kids to bunkers, according to Volodymyr. But while he sees this as an overreaction, he admitted that the fear of invasion is there. But he says the Ukrainian government has been steadfast in trying to keep its citizens calm.
But I don't see any reason to worry. I will take metro, I'll walk. People will be doing the same mundane, usual things. But the fear of an invasion, of course, yeah.
Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Locsin says repatriation efforts are underway for Pinoys who want to come home. About 6 Filipinos have already requested for repatriation last week. Those in need of assistance are advised to contact the Philippine Embassy in Poland.
Meanwhile, the Trade Department says the Russia-Ukraine crisis could spur a surge of investments in renewable energy. That's if the standoff between the two nations would cause further disruptions in the fuel market. Trade Undersecretary Seferino Rodolfo said that renewables will become more viable if more fuel prices continue to increase. Rodolfo said the crisis presents an opportunity for the Philippines to become a hub for supply chain dependent light manufacturing. Separately, Trade Secretary Mon Lopez said that the DTI is still studying the potential economic impact of a Russia-Ukraine conflict. Here are the other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The Senate appears unlikely to give its concurrence to the RCEP agreement even when the session resumes after the May elections. Senator Coco Pimentel told Businessworld that RCEP will be difficult to pass if it's not receiving full support from Malacanang. Senate President and Vice Presidential candidate Tito Soto earlier said that if the decision was based on previous deliberations, the Senate would likely reject the RCEP. The Senate failed to give its concurrence to the deal before the Upper House adjourned session earlier this month for the election break. Soto pointed out that the Senate only has 6 days left to discuss the RCEP when it resumes session on May 23rd.
The European Union has agreed to grant about 1.7 billion pesos to the Philippines. That is in order to support agriculture and climate projects over the next few years. Majority of that aid will be allocated to the agriculture businesses in the Bangsamoro region. The Bangsamoro Agri-Enterprise Program will help local farmers and cooperatives use integrated farming systems to improve the quality and quantity of produce. The rest of the funding will go to the National Copernicus Capacity Support Action Program for the Philippines. This 3-year project aims to develop space science and technology for use against climate change.
Now this from the Philippine Star, the BIR targets to raise more than 2.4 trillion pesos in collections this year. That's by strengthening its campaign against tax evaders. Citing preliminary figures, the agency says it reached its target of collecting over 2 trillion pesos last year, beating the 2022 total by about 7%. For this year, the BIR eyes to increase its collection by over 17% to boost state revenues and reduce debt accumulation. And that's a first look into the business day this Thursday, February 24, 2022. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.